Now, chickens, just like human beings, need special care, utmost care, especially during their first 4 months. Now, in this particular episode, I'll take you through the vaccination program or vaccination schedule so that at least I can reduce mortalities for chicks that are from day old to around 4 months, because that is when they are most vulnerable. And just note that different chicken breeds follow different vaccination program. So whatever it is that we're going to discuss here is not cast in stone. You might find one vaccine coming before another when it comes to a different chicken breed. So don't say that I gave you a strict schedule for you to follow. What I'm just giving you is what we use in our chicken farm, especially for those people who are doing pure and improved Kenyan. Now, for those people who don't know what vaccination is, now vaccination is simply the addition of limited amount of disease-causing virus in small amounts to enable it to trigger antibodies to fight off this particular disease in case of a full-blown attack. Now, if you brought your chicken to the farm, especially the chicks, day-old chicks, what exactly should you do? Number one, when you've brought your chicks from the hatchery, the first thing you need to ask the hatchery is if your chicks have been vaccinated against Marek's. This particular vaccine is always optional, but the moment this particular disease attacks your chicken, you will actually incur a lot of losses. It's a very bad disease, very dangerous, and it's caused by a herpes virus. So I want you to just go and check that video on Marek's to be able just to know the extent to which this disease can, paralyze your chicken. Now, when it comes to vaccination against Marek's, you should know that only day-old chicks, you cannot vaccinate a chick that is more than a day. It has to be day-old at most. The oldest vaccinated chick has to be 24 hours from that point where it was hatched. But now in advanced hatcheries, you'll find that they use what we call the ocular method, where they vaccinate fertilized eggs before they are hatched. But that is in advanced hatcheries. Now, the mode in which they do this vaccination is through they inject the subcutaneous, just below the skin. They will inject the vaccine into that particular chick. So just note that if you're to give this particular vaccine to your chick, it has to be through injection to the subcutaneous, and your chick must be a day old. It can't be more than that, because if it is more than that, then it will never be effective. So now, once you've already vaccinated your chickens your chicks against Marek's, the next thing is you have to introduce your chicks to what we call liquid paraffin. Now, liquid paraffin just helps in digestion of whatever food that your chick will eat, so that it can have a smooth process of pooping, so that the poop does not dry around the vent area. And alongside this particular liquid paraffin, there's what we call chick formula, which you have to give, that has multivitamins. And these multivitamins might also have what we call vitamin K, which actually helps these particular chicks when it comes to the dry placenta. That is because they are newly hatched. This is day one. They still have that dry placenta around them. So this vitamin K will actually help them against that dry placenta, because sometimes they will eat that. So it will help them on that. As I've told you, liquid paraffin plus the chick formula has to be given just before they start now eating whatever chick mash or whatever food that you've brought for the chicks. Now that is day one. So immediately after that, kindly make sure that you give liquid paraffin and the multivitamins for a period of 3 days, at least 3 days. Then after the third day, now we're going to the fourth day. From day 4 to around day 7, when they are 1 week, during this period of time, you can introduce the Newcastle vaccine. Now, this first dose, because Newcastle vaccine is given in different doses, not just one dose. This first dose, we always recommend that you don't give Newcastle plain. We have Newcastle plain vaccine, then we have Newcastle plus what we call IB. IB means infectious bronchitis, which is a respiratory disease for chickens. So the first dose of Newcastle vaccine should actually be Newcastle plus IB. Make sure when you go to your agrovet, ask for Newcastle plus IB. Now, this particular vaccine has to be stored under very cool temperatures. If you subject it to high temperatures, they'll actually go bad within like 2 hours. So if you intend probably to vaccinate your chicken the following day and you've bought the vaccine today, make sure you store them in your fridge, your refrigerator, or any cool place that will maintain that particular vaccine. Remember, this vaccine, if not stored well, after 2 hours it becomes poisonous. Now, this vaccine is administered orally or through the eye drop. If you want to do eye drop, you can also do that, or you can mix that particular vaccine with the drinking water that your chicks are actually taking in that water trough. So those are the 3 ways in which you can administer the vaccine. But kindly note that once you've started administering this vaccine, count only 2 hours, after which it's always recommended to dispose of that water where these chicks cannot get them, and also wash that particular water trough very thoroughly, because immediately after 2 hours that particular vaccine becomes poisonous. So always note that this is very, very, very important. Now, some people might ask, what is this Newcastle disease? What is this thing that we are vaccinating against? Now, Newcastle is a very infectious disease, which is actually a viral disease. So some of the signs and symptoms that you need to know, sometimes maybe you didn't vaccinate, or maybe you got a new chicken when it's already past the vaccination age, and you need to know what are these signs and symptoms of Newcastle disease. So if you experience any of these signs and symptoms, kindly note that chances are high that your chicken might have Newcastle disease. So the first one is loss of appetite. You might find also your chicken coughing, gasping for air. It might have nasal discharge. Your chicken can also have watery eyes. When it comes to diarrhea, to the poop itself, you'll find that the chicken has kind of green like diarrhea. And also it affects in some sort of way the nervous system. So you might find also your chicken has some sort of paralysis. So once you experience such symptoms or signs, actually chances are very high that your chicken might actually be attacked, or rather your chicken might actually have Newcastle disease. And this Newcastle disease is very infectious, and it might cause death in a large number of your chicken. So kindly note that the Newcastle vaccine is very, very, very important. So also note that Newcastle disease does not have any known treatment. The only thing you can do after your chicken has been infected by Newcastle, you can only administer antibiotics. But just know antibiotics will just prevent bacterial infections once it has gotten the Newcastle virus, but it will not treat the virus itself. Remember, an antibiotic does not have any effect on viruses. So just know that if your chicken has actually been infected by Newcastle, the only thing you can do is to give them antibiotics for around 3 to 5 days. Then you see, and then immediately after that, always make sure that you give your chicken multivitamins for around 3 days. Now, from day 10 to day 14, we normally administer the third vaccine, and in this case that vaccine is called Gumboro vaccine. Now, Gumboro is just a name it's a town, it's a district in the US, in Delaware, where this disease was first recognized. So in normal sense, normally this disease would have been called infectious basal something. You need to go and check, but normally most people will call it Gumboro because that is the first district, or rather the first place where it was recognized. Now, this particular disease causes immunosuppression and mortality for young chicks. Kindly note that this does not affect older chicken. It only affects young chicks. So mortalities could be for chicks that are between 3 to 6 weeks. So it's always very important to administer Gumboro vaccine between day 10 and day 14. Now, how do you administer Gumboro vaccine? Similar to Newcastle vaccine, Gumboro can also be administered either orally, and personally for us at the farm, we always administer it by mixing it with drinking water. When you go to your local agrovet, they'll be able to tell you how to mix and in what ratio. But for us, we prefer, because we have a lot of chicks, it's always best, instead of doing it orally one by one, it's always best to mix it with the chicks drinking water. And before you do that, kindly make sure that you don't give your chicks water. Before you give the vaccine, don't give your chicks water, because now if you give them water and then later on you mix the vaccine with the water, some chicks might not actually be able to take that vaccine because they're already, they're already okay when it comes to water. So deny your chicks water until you administer this vaccine, so that you increase the chances of these particular chicks being vaccinated. Now, when the chicks are 20 days, and I'm assuming that after the Gumboro vaccine, you've also given multivitamin for the next 3 days after the vaccination. Now, when your chicks get to 20 days old, we always administer the second dose of Newcastle vaccine. And in this case, you can opt to take Newcastle plain, but I also prefer you just take Newcastle plus IB, because it will not have any effect. It will actually just have an added advantage. But if you still get Newcastle plain, it's well and good. We normally administer Newcastle plain or Newcastle plus IB when they are 20 days old. The mode of administration is similar to the way we did the first. We normally either administer orally if you have very few chicks, but if you have a lot of chicks, it's always good to mix the vaccine with the drinking water. Same precautions as we did in the first one. 2 hours, store the vaccine in a very cool place if you're not administering it immediately. And after 2 hours of administration, make sure you dispose that water, because now the vaccine will turn into being poison and you don't want your chicks to drink poison. Now, immediately after that, as always, as I've said, make sure for the next 3 days you give your chicks multivitamins. Avoid in any vaccination case giving your chicks an antibiotic, because it will trigger the antibodies to actually fight off the vaccine that you're giving. So never give your chicks antibiotics after vaccinations. Just make sure you give them multivitamins. Now, when your chicks are 24 days old, we actually administer the second dose of Gumboro. Remember, the first one was the intermediate Gumboro vaccine. Now, the second dose of Gumboro, you always administer when they're around 24 days old. And similar to the first dose, you administer them orally or through mixing with their drinking water. That is as simple as it gets. When it comes to these second doses, it's always mostly the same way you did the first. Now, when your chicks are 45 days old or around 6 weeks, we advise that you vaccinate your chicks against what we call fowl pox. Now, this is normally done through a wing stab. Yeah. So some of the signs and symptoms of fowl pox in your chicken might include some scabs or wart-like lesions on the comb, on the eyes, on the mouth. Yeah. You can also find that the eyelids of your chick are actually swollen and maybe even shut because of the swelling and all that. You may experience that your chicken might have some sort of loss of appetite, weight loss, and reduced consumption of water. So those are some of the signs and symptoms of fowl pox. It's always advisable to vaccinate against fowl pox at 45 days, when your chicks are 45 days or 6 weeks. Now, on the 60th day, or rather when your chicks are 2 months, we normally administer what we call fowl typhoid. Now, fowl typhoid is not that common, but it's good to administer that vaccine. Some people might decide to ignore because it's not very common, but just to be sure and to be safe, it's always good to vaccinate against it. So you'll find that in this particular case, it's done through an injection on the breast or on the thigh, as you can see on the screen. You can either decide to get a vet to do that for you if you don't know, but if you're sure you're good with injections, syringes and all that, you can do it yourself. But personally, I prefer bringing a vet to do that for me. This is an important thing to note when it comes to fowl typhoid. Do not vaccinate your chicken or your chicks against fowl typhoid if they are less than 2 months. You'll have actually destabilized. You might end up having a lot of mortalities. So ensure that whatever it is that you're vaccinating against this fowl typhoid is 2 months and above. You are not also limited to vaccinating only 2 months. You can vaccinate your older chicken, even if they had already gotten that particular vaccination. It is actually helpful when they are doing this vaccination to vaccinate all your chickens. within the farm. Now, when your chicks are 18 weeks or around 135 days, we always administer the last, or rather the third dose of Newcastle. Now, Newcastle is always advisable that every 3 months you do you vaccinate your chickens. So it doesn't have to be like this is the last one. I'm just talking about the first 4 months of your chicks after they're hatched. But immediately after 4 months, always count every 3 months and vaccinate your chicks against Newcastle, because it's a very common disease. It's a continuous vaccination, schedule that you need to put in your mind. Now, at 135 days, as I've said, or 18 weeks, we always administer the third dose of Newcastle, Newcastle vaccine, where we administer it, as I said, orally or through drinking water, just as we've done, or rather, just as we did with the first 2 vaccines, 2 doses, right? Now, when your chicks are around 143 days, or for example, if you're counting in terms of weeks, 19 weeks, we always administer a dewormer. We deworm all the chicks so that now from here on now, they will be rid of the worms that they've actually been getting through all these first 3 months, or rather first 3 to 4 months. So make sure at 19 weeks, you deworm your chicks, plus also your older chicken. It's always advisable to also carry out, this is the same thing as Newcastle, every 3 months, kindly carry out deworming of your chicks, because especially for me who's doing a free range, chances are very high that my chicks are actually very, very much infected by worms. So it's always good to do deworming of your chicken. And if we're talking about the chicks, at 19 weeks or 143 days, make sure you do your deworming. Just a pointer is that we normally advise that you vaccinate your chickens mostly mornings or evenings, because of the temperatures. Most of these vaccines are poisonous when subjected to high temperatures. So always administer your vaccinations in the morning. Personally, I prefer morning, and for those who prefer evening, well and good, but for us, we'll recommend the morning. So that's it for our video today. I hope you've learned a thing or two about vaccinating your chicken. And as I've said, different chicken breeds would require different vaccination schedules. These are just whatever it is that we've discussed today is just the vaccination program that we take in our farm based on whatever chicken breed that we've kept, which is pure and improved chicken. So if you have exotic breed, for example, you can inquire from your local vet on the vaccination schedule to follow. Now, if you have a question, any question regarding this particular video or any other video that you've watched in our channel, you can always go to the comment section of that particular video and post your question. If you find that probably too much in the public domain, you can always connect us on our social media platform and even send your feedback, so that at least you can help us grow in this particular journey. As I said, this channel is for new farmers just like me who are starting up, and we are learning together in the process. So until next time.